Most people think disrespect is obvious, an insult, a raised voice, a direct confrontation. But in reality, disrespect is rarely loud. It is quiet, subtle, hidden behind polite words and friendly smiles. Someone interrupts you slightly more than others. Someone dismisses your opinion in a meeting. Someone makes a small joke at your expense. And every time it happens, you feel something strange, a moment of discomfort, but you ignore it. You tell yourself it's nothing, yet what you are experiencing is something deeper, a hidden shift in how people perceive your value. Because the truth about respect is uncomfortable. People rarely announce when they stop respecting you. They simply begin treating you differently. And if you don't recognize the signs, the pattern continues until one day you realize something has changed. The question is not whether people judge your value, they do. The real question is, what signals are you sending without realizing it? Because once you understand the psychology behind respect, you begin to notice patterns you once overlooked. Patterns that explain why some people command respect effortlessly, while others slowly lose it without understanding why. Part 1. The hidden psychology of social value. Every human interaction contains something invisible, a quiet negotiation. A negotiation that happens faster than conscious thought. Within seconds of meeting someone, the human brain begins scanning for signals. Who appears confident, who hesitates, who speaks first, who apologizes quickly, who laughs nervously. These small details create an impression of social value. Psychologists often describe this process as status perception. It is not about money or job titles or appearance. It is about the signals people send through behavior, signals that communicate how someone sees themselves, because people tend to treat you according to the value you project. Imagine two individuals entering the same room. One speaks calmly. They listen carefully. They respond thoughtfully. They do not rush to prove themselves. The other appears uncertain. They explain themselves repeatedly. They laugh nervously when challenged. They apologize frequently. Both individuals may be equally intelligent, equally capable, but the signals they send are completely different. And those signals shape how others respond to them. Humans evolved in social environments where hierarchy mattered. In tribal communities, individuals constantly assessed each other's reliability, competence, and confidence. Those instincts still exist today. They simply operate beneath the surface. This is why some people appear to command respect effortlessly. They are not necessarily stronger or smarter, but the signals they send communicate certainty, clarity, stability, and stability attracts respect. The opposite is also true. When someone appears uncertain about their own value, others unconsciously begin adjusting their behavior around that perception. They interrupt more easily. They challenge more frequently. They dismiss opinions more quickly, not always intentionally, but instinctively, because social dynamics constantly adapt to perceived value. This realization can feel uncomfortable because it suggests that respect is not only about how others behave, it is also about the signals we send. Think about the last time you observed someone who seemed naturally respected in a group. What did you notice about their behavior? Were they louder? More aggressive? Probably not. In many cases, the most respected individuals are simply the calmest. They speak with clarity. They listen without insecurity. They rarely rush to defend themselves. And those signals create a powerful impression. Confidence. Once that impression appears, social dynamics begin to shift. People listen more carefully. Interruptions become rare. Opinions carry more weight. Not because authority was demanded, but because authority was communicated. Understanding this psychological process is the first step toward recognizing why respect sometimes disappears quietly. Because the loss of respect rarely begins with an insult. It begins with subtle signals that slowly reshape how others perceive you. Part 2. The subtle signals that make people lose respect. Respect rarely disappears suddenly. It fades. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. Most people never notice the exact moment when the shift begins, because the shift doesn't happen through a single dramatic event. It happens through small signals. Signals so subtle that they seem insignificant at first. But over time, those signals begin shaping how others perceive you. One of the most common signals is excessive self-doubt. Imagine someone sharing an idea during a discussion. Before they even finish explaining it, they add a disclaimer. I am not sure if this makes sense. Maybe this is a stupid idea. I could be wrong, but these phrases seem harmless, even humble, but psychologically, they send a powerful message. They tell the listener something important. This person is not confident in their own thinking. And when someone communicates uncertainty about their own value, others unconsciously begin adjusting their response. They listen less carefully. They challenge the idea more easily. They dismiss the suggestion more quickly, because confidence often influences perception more than the idea itself. Now imagine the same idea presented differently. This approach might solve the problem. No apology, no disclaimer, just clarity. The idea itself may be identical, but the signal is completely different. The listener perceives certainty, and certainty commands attention. Another signal that quietly lowers respect is constant approval seeking. When someone repeatedly asks for validation, it shifts the dynamic of the conversation. They look for reassurance. They ask if their opinion is acceptable. They look around the room to see if others agree. This behavior communicates something subtle but powerful. It suggests that their confidence depends on the approval of others. And when someone appears dependent on approval, the social hierarchy adjusts accordingly. Think about moments when someone constantly asks, "Do you think that's okay? Is that good enough? What do you think I should do?" Occasional feedback is healthy, but constant reassurance sends a signal of insecurity. And insecurity often reduces perceived authority. There is also a behavioral pattern that quietly reduces respect over time. Over-explaining. When someone feels the need to justify every decision, every opinion, every boundary, they unintentionally weaken their own authority. Imagine someone declining a request. Instead of simply saying no, they explain themselves for several minutes. They apologize. They provide detailed reasons. They attempt to soften the refusal. But the longer the explanation continues, the more the boundary begins to feel negotiable. Because explanation invites debate. Debate invites pressure, and pressure erodes boundaries. In contrast, people who command respect often communicate decisions simply. This won't work for me. Short, clear, neutral. No justification necessary. Another signal that quietly influences respect is tolerating small disrespect repeatedly. When someone allows minor boundary violations without addressing them, a pattern begins to form. A joke that feels slightly insulting, an interruption during conversation, a request that feels unreasonable. Each moment seems too small to confront, so it passes unnoticed. But social dynamics are shaped by patterns. And when patterns repeat without consequence, behavior escalates. This is why some people eventually feel surrounded by disrespect. Not because people suddenly changed, but because small signals slowly reshape the dynamic. Think about a moment when someone interrupted you repeatedly during a conversation. Did you address it, or did you simply allow it to continue? Because each moment like that teaches others something. It teaches them how much space they can take and how much space you are willing to give up. Once those patterns form, respect begins adjusting accordingly. But understanding these signals is not meant to create self-criticism. It is meant to create awareness. Because once you recognize the signals that influence respect, something powerful happens. You begin seeing them everywhere. And once you see them clearly, you can choose which signals you send. Part 3. Why kind people are often disrespected. One of the most confusing experiences in social dynamics is this. The kindest people are often treated with the least respect. At first glance, this seems unfair. Kindness should create appreciation. Empathy should build trust. Supportiveness should strengthen relationships. And in healthy environments, it often does. But in environments where social dynamics are competitive, kindness can sometimes be misunderstood. Not because kindness is weak, but because kindness without boundaries can appear as submission. Imagine someone who constantly prioritizes the comfort of others. They avoid conflict. They tolerate jokes that make them uncomfortable. They agree to requests even when they are inconvenient. They remain polite, even when someone treats them unfairly. From their perspective, they are maintaining harmony. They are trying to be considerate. But from the perspective of someone observing the interaction, a different signal may appear. This person rarely protects their own space. And when someone rarely protects their own space, others unconsciously begin occupying it. This does not mean kindness causes disrespect. It means unprotected kindness can invite it. Healthy kindness contains strength. It contains clarity. It contains the ability to say no when necessary. But when kindness becomes the avoidance of boundaries, the social dynamic shifts. There is a psychological concept known as agreeableness. Agreeable individuals tend to be cooperative, compassionate, and accommodating. These traits create strong friendships and supportive communities. But highly agreeable individuals often struggle with confrontation. They prioritize peace over conflict, and in environments where people compete for influence, this tendency can be exploited. Think about someone you know who is consistently kind but rarely challenges others. Do people respect them, or do people sometimes take advantage of their generosity? The difference between respected kindness and exploited kindness often comes down to boundaries. Respect grows when kindness is balanced with clarity, when someone can be warm and compassionate while still protecting their limits. This combination sends a powerful signal. It communicates strength without aggression, and strength attracts respect. But when kindness exists without boundaries, the signal becomes different. Others may begin interpreting it as permission. Permission to interrupt, permission to demand, permission to dismiss. Understanding this distinction can transform how someone navigates social relationships, because the goal is not to become less kind. The goal is to become kind with boundaries. And that combination is one of the most powerful social signals a person can send. Part 4. The confidence illusion. One of the greatest misconceptions about respect is that it belongs only to the most talented people, or the most intelligent, or the most accomplished. But if you observe social dynamics carefully, something surprising becomes clear. The people who command the most respect are not always the most capable. They are often the most certain. Human perception responds strongly to confidence, even when the confidence is not perfectly justified. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon extensively in group discussions. Individuals who speak with certainty are often perceived as more competent, even when their ideas are not necessarily better. This does not mean confidence replaces competence, but it does influence perception, and perception shapes behavior. Imagine two individuals presenting an idea during a meeting. The first explains their idea cautiously. They hesitate. They add disclaimers. They repeatedly check if others agree. The second person presents their idea calmly and directly. They speak clearly. They pause without rushing. They show no urgency to defend themselves. Both ideas may be equally valuable, but the group often reacts differently. The second person appears more authoritative, more reliable, more confident, and confidence creates a psychological effect known as authority bias. People naturally trust individuals who appear certain. This is why public speakers, leaders, and negotiators often focus not only on the message, but on how the message is delivered. Confidence does not require loudness. It does not require dominance. In fact, many of the most respected individuals speak quietly, but they speak with clarity. They do not rush to prove themselves. They do not seek approval after every statement. They simply express their thoughts with calm certainty. Think about the last time someone spoke with complete confidence in a conversation. Did you notice how the room responded? People listened. Interruptions became rare. Questions were asked with curiosity rather than challenge. Confidence changed the dynamic. Now imagine the opposite. Someone who constantly defends themselves. Someone who appears unsure. Someone who apologizes frequently for their own opinions. Even if their ideas are intelligent, the signal becomes different. Others begin testing them, interrupting them, challenging them more aggressively. Not necessarily because people intend to disrespect them, but because uncertainty invites pressure. Understanding this psychological illusion can change how you view confidence. Confidence is not arrogance. Confidence is clarity. It is the quiet certainty that your thoughts deserve space in the conversation. And when that certainty becomes visible, respect often follows naturally. Part 5. Behaviors that quietly lower your status. Respect is not determined by one moment. It is shaped by patterns. Small behaviors repeated consistently over time. Some of these behaviors are so common that people rarely question them, yet they influence how others perceive social value. One of the most common is excessive apologizing. Apologizing when you make a mistake is healthy. It shows accountability. But apologizing constantly, even when no mistake occurred, creates a different signal. Consider how often people say, "Sorry, can I ask a question? Sorry, I just wanted to add something. Sorry, if this sounds wrong." These phrases seem polite, but they communicate something subtle. They imply that your presence requires permission. Over time, this pattern lowers perceived authority, because authority rarely apologizes for existing. Another behavior that quietly lowers status is nervous laughter. Laughter is a powerful social tool. It builds connection. It reduces tension. But when someone laughs every time they are challenged, interrupted, or criticized, the signal changes. It communicates discomfort, and discomfort invites pressure. Imagine someone presenting an idea. Another person challenges them aggressively. If they respond with nervous laughter, the interaction becomes unbalanced. The challenger senses uncertainty, and uncertainty invites further challenge. But if the response remains calm and composed, the dynamic remains stable. Another behavior that subtly reduces respect is over-explaining decisions. People often believe that providing more information strengthens their position. But excessive explanation can have the opposite effect. When someone justifies every choice in detail, it creates the impression that the decision requires validation. And once validation becomes part of the interaction, the listener begins evaluating the decision instead of accepting it. Now compare that with someone who communicates decisions simply, "This is the direction we're taking." Short, clear, confident. The decision feels settled. And when something feels settled, people rarely challenge it. Think about moments when someone communicated a boundary clearly. Did you feel the urge to argue, or did the clarity itself make the boundary easier to accept? Small behaviors like these shape how others perceive authority, not through force, but through signals. Signals that communicate confidence, stability, and clarity. Once you become aware of these signals, you begin noticing them everywhere, in meetings, in friendships, in everyday conversations. And once you notice them, you can choose which signals you send. Part 6. How powerful people protect their respect. Some people appear naturally respected wherever they go. Not because they demand it, not because they intimidate others, but because they understand something subtle about social dynamics. They protect their boundaries early. Respect is easiest to maintain at the beginning of a relationship, before patterns form, before expectations solidify. Powerful individuals rarely allow small disrespect to pass repeatedly. If someone interrupts them, they calmly reclaim the conversation. If someone makes an inappropriate joke, they address it without hostility. If someone requests something unreasonable, they decline clearly, not aggressively, simply confidently. This behavior sends a powerful signal. It communicates that their boundaries are visible, and visible boundaries discourage testing. Another trait common among respected individuals is emotional stability. They do not react impulsively. They do not escalate conflict unnecessarily. They maintain composure. This stability creates predictability, and predictability creates trust. When someone reacts emotionally to every challenge, others begin controlling the interaction by triggering those emotions. But when someone remains calm regardless of pressure, manipulation becomes difficult. Calm individuals cannot easily be pushed into reactions. Another important trait is comfort with silence. Many people rush to fill silence in conversations. They explain more. They defend themselves. They try to avoid awkward pauses. But individuals who command respect often allow silence to exist. They pause before responding. They think before speaking. And this pause creates psychological weight because silence signals confidence. It shows that the person does not feel pressured to perform or justify themselves. Think about conversations where someone speaks slowly and deliberately. Did you notice how people listen more carefully? The pace itself commands attention. Respect often grows from these subtle behaviors, not from domination, but from presence. A calm, grounded presence that communicates certainty. And once that presence becomes consistent, social dynamics begin adjusting around it because people instinctively recognize someone who understands their own value. Part 7. The silent power of boundaries. One of the most misunderstood aspects of respect is the role of boundaries. Many people assume boundaries require confrontation, arguments, harsh words, dramatic declarations, but the most powerful boundaries are often quiet. They exist in behavior, in tone, in consistency. Imagine someone asking you to do something unreasonable. A common response might be hesitation, or a long explanation, or an apology before refusing, but boundaries do not need to be complicated. A simple sentence can change the entire interaction. "That doesn't work for me." Calm, direct, final. This type of response does something important. It communicates certainty, and certainty removes negotiation. When someone senses uncertainty, they often try to push further. They negotiate, they persuade, they pressure. But when the boundary is delivered calmly and clearly, something interesting happens. Most people stop pushing because the decision feels settled. Boundaries also appear in smaller everyday moments. Someone interrupts you repeatedly during a conversation. Instead of allowing the interruption to continue, you simply say, Let me finish, not angrily, not defensively, just clearly. These small moments shape the social dynamic because each time you reinforce your space, others learn something. They learn that your presence carries weight. Another powerful boundary involves time. People who are consistently respected tend to protect their schedules. They do not allow repeated last-minute changes. They do not tolerate chronic lateness without acknowledgement. They value their time openly. And when someone values their own time, others begin valuing it as well. The silent power of boundaries lies in consistency, not occasional confrontation, but steady clarity. When boundaries remain consistent, people adjust their behavior naturally. Over time, something subtle happens. The individuals who respect your boundaries remain close. The individuals who depend on crossing them begin drifting away. And what remains are relationships built on mutual respect. Part 8. The observer mindset. The most powerful shift in social awareness happens when someone stops reacting automatically and begins observing. Instead of responding immediately to every interaction, they pause, they watch, they analyze, because human behavior follows patterns. Once you begin noticing those patterns, social interactions become easier to understand. Someone interrupts you repeatedly. Instead of feeling frustrated, you recognize the pattern. Someone dismisses your opinion. Instead of feeling insulted, you notice the signal. Someone pressures you to agree with them. Instead of feeling obligated, you observe the tactic. This shift from reaction to observation creates psychological distance, and distance creates clarity. Imagine watching a conversation from the outside. You notice the body language, the tone, the subtle attempts to control the interaction. But because you are observing instead of reacting, the situation becomes easier to navigate. This mindset is powerful because it removes emotional confusion. Manipulation relies on emotional reactions. It relies on confusion, on pressure, on insecurity. But the observer mindset disrupts this dynamic because once you see the pattern, you no longer respond unconsciously. You respond intentionally, and intentional responses are difficult to manipulate. Over time, this awareness becomes natural. You begin recognizing social signals instantly: confidence, insecurity, manipulation, respect. You see the patterns clearly, and once you see them, you gain the freedom to choose how you respond. This awareness does not make someone cold. It makes them conscious. They still value relationships. They still care about others, but they no longer ignore signals that shape social dynamics. And because of that awareness, their boundaries become stronger, their interactions become clearer, and respect becomes easier to maintain. The quiet truth about respect is rarely announced. No one walks into a room and declares how much they respect another person. Instead, respect appears in small behaviors, in tone, in attention, in the way people listen when you speak. And just as respect appears quietly, it can also disappear quietly through small signals, through subtle patterns, through moments that seem too small to address. But once you understand how these dynamics work, something changes. You begin noticing the signals earlier. You recognize the patterns sooner. And the moment you recognize them, you regain control over the interaction. Because the person who understands the game of social dynamics is no longer playing blindly. They see the signals. They recognize the tests. They respond with clarity, and clarity transforms relationships. Some people will respect your boundaries immediately. Others may resist. But over time, the individuals who truly value you will adjust, because respect grows where clarity exists. And the moment you stop ignoring the subtle signals that shape social dynamics, you begin creating a new pattern. A pattern where your presence carries weight, where your words receive attention, and where respect becomes a natural part of every interaction. Because once you understand the psychology of respect, you no longer wait for it. You communicate it quietly, confidently, and consistently.